Hello and welcome back to the Deep Topics with Shaun podcast. I'm your host, Shaun, and this is episode 4 of the podcast. I'm so glad and grateful that you're joining us here today. And if you're new to the podcast, make sure to subscribe on the platform that you're watching or listening to this on, and leave a like as well as a comment or review with your thoughts on whether you resonate with anything in this episode or don't. And let's have a discussion about that in the comments down below. If you're new to the podcast, this is a platform that I created whereby I talk about stories that I resonate with on a weekly basis. And these are often deep topics that we usually shy away from in our daily conversations, but we find them so fulfilling and enjoyable when we do engage with them. And having resonated with that feeling, I recognize that there was not enough space in our media and in our daily lives for us to have these types of conversations. So I'm so glad and grateful that I can create such a platform and have this be the space to have such conversations. Again, my name is Shaun, and this is Deep Topics with Shaun. And last week we spoke about my meditation journey and the impact of my meditation journey on my mental clarity and my stress management. And some interesting takeaways were found in that episode, particularly about how when you start to observe your mind, there are things that you will discover about your mental tendencies that allow you to gain a better sense of power and control over the circumstances of your life and your interactions and behaviors in relation to those circumstances. So it makes us then think about, why is meditation so challenging and why do most people shy away from it? I've often had this conversation with many people where they either tell me that meditation is something beneath them, or meditation is something beyond them, or meditation is something too challenging, or meditation is something too difficult, or they wonder whether meditation fits in with their spiritual or belief systems. And I was one of those people. I was one of those people that doubted the worth and validity of the meditation practice until I got into a space where I was rocked by life and its circumstances and did not really have any other choice but to seek solace inwards. So, to be able to make the practice simpler and easier for the average person, what I've done is that I've reflected on my 5 years of meditation practice, and I've kind of understood the fundamentals of the practice, and have put together a meditation course which I call the 5 minute stress relieving meditation. To make it easier for the average person to practice meditation, what I've done is that I've reflected on my 5 years of meditation practice, and I've kind of simmered it down to the essentials and the basics, and I've created a meditation course which I call the 5 minute stress relieving meditation. And this course is special because it comes from someone who once was in the dark about what meditation was and what is even a meditation practice. So what I did was that I recorded 12 video lessons, and I put together some drawings and some summaries and some illustrations, and I put it together in a course which also has some extra bonuses so that someone like you can start to practice meditation, and it makes it so much more attainable to meet you where you are in your life. You don't really need to have any prior experience with meditation. There's not much you need to understand going into it. And what you really need to have is a willingness to want mental clarity and inner peace. And when you've made your mind about wanting those things, and you've made your mind about setting your sights on having it for yourself, then you recognize that whatever practice is available to you to allow you to create that type of situation is a practice that you must then embrace. So to make it easier, again, what I'm doing is that I'm offering a promotion for the next following weeks, where I'm offering a free 45-minute coaching session with every purchase of this meditation course. And in that coaching session, what I'll help you to do is that I'll help you to identify a goal that you're currently struggling or facing challenges with. And I'll also help you get some clarity on what might be the mental blockage or obstacle that is preventing you from achieving that goal. I'll help you to develop a plan to overcome that obstacle and also to gather some courage to be able to take action on that plan starting today. So, if you're someone that knows what you want in life or is ready to be more decisive with the actions that you're taking, then click down below and download the 5 minute stress relieving meditation course and start to practice the inner observation and stop being a whiner, stop being a complainer, and stop believing that the circumstances of your life are outside of your control, because there are many things that you can gather in your tool set, and one of those things is your mind, which when you start to practice enough observation, you recognize that your mind is not really something that you are, it's something that you have. And because your mind is something that you have, it means that it's a tool to enable you to interact in physical reality. And that is a very powerful tool to have. So sharpen your mind and clear your mind and clean your mind and prepare it for navigating the obstacles and the challenges of physical reality and daily living. And by doing so, you greatly increase your chance of success in any endeavor that you set your mind to. And you really like level up in a sense of being able to do things that you never once thought were possible. So again, the 5 minute stress relieving meditation course is available now for you to purchase down below, and for limited time only, you get a free 45-minute coaching session with me. I'll help you to identify a mental obstacle or blockage that is holding you back from a life goal that you want to achieve. I'll help you develop a plan and I'll help you gather the courage to take action on that immediately. Don't hesitate, click down below and get that course and start to take life into your own hands. I've used this phrase before: grab life. Grab life and stop being passive and flailing in the wind, and stop allowing life to beat you and batter you, and start to take some action. Start to take some action and gather some maturity. They never taught you about that life could be something that you can navigate consciously and willingly. I'm telling you now, start to do that for yourself. Yeah, we're in episode 4 of Deep Topics with Shaun, and this is the episode in which I reflect on the past 3 episodes and start to gain a bit more clarity about what exactly am I doing with this podcast, and start to also gain some clarity about what are the types of topics that I resonate with and believe are impactful to share with people. So, let me give you firstly a bit of insight into what I've been experiencing this week. And this week has been a pretty profound moment for me, because over the past 5 years of doing meditation, it's always been a debate about what exactly are the chakras. And if you've ever heard of them, you know that they're described as subtle energy centers inside the body, but they're also described as non physical. And knowing that they're subtle means that they're challenging to perceive and they're challenging to feel, but they've been shared in testimony and text that their presence has been validated and proved by the great spiritual masters. So, when I started meditating, it was not at all about finding the chakras, and it was more about, my meditation story. It was more about dealing with the buffoon that I was working with, who was like just a demon of a person and was really ruling the employees with fear, anger, and frustration. So, for me to be able to gather a sense of peacefulness and calm as I went about my daily interactions with this person, I needed a meditation practice to be able to put me into a state of mental clarity and peace, so that I did not either lash out at this individual or fall apart at the first interaction of their damaging characteristics. When I left that job in Joburg, which was sometime in 2019, I remember mentioning this in the last episode, that I got into this deep, deep depression, and I started meditating more strongly. And when I was meditating at the time, I was like feeling this current, or this movement of some type of energy up my spine and like moving into my forehead region. And this was all happening with my eyes closed, and I wasn't really seeing any light or anything like that, but I could feel something moving there. And I know, based on like the physical understanding of the physical body, that there's no straight channel going up the spine into the forehead except for the nervous system. So some type of current was perhaps moving in the nervous system, or based on what the spiritual teachings are, there are subtle energy channels also in that space, and something was moving there. So I got the first taste of that. There's something to see and feel when you concentrate deeply enough and relax your body sufficiently. And I got that first taste 5 years ago. So I was beginning to meditate more and more often, and I was always like looking for more understanding of what meditation was, because I started to be able to perceive that the thoughts in my head were like happening on their own. And I was starting to also see that I'm not really a mind. I'm not really the narrator of the inner monologue. I'm more so the listener of the inner monologue. And so the narrator is not me. It sounds like me, and the thoughts also sound like me, but they are happening autonomously. They're happening on their own. So what was beginning to happen for me was like there was a separation occurring between, the mind as it was happening, and me, the watcher, who was here. So I was here watching, and the mind was going on, and it was going on like incessantly, autonomously on its own, and perpetually it was just going on and on and on. So in 2020, I remember I stumbled across this book called Autobiography of a Yogi, and this book was written by a one of the great spiritual masters of the past time, Paramahansa Yogananda. And in this book, he talks about his experiences with various spiritual individuals and some weird and wonderful things that they were able to do due to being so in touch with this like great spiritual reality that is within. That was kind of a game changer for me, because it opened my eyes to that there was something going on intertwined with physical reality that is described as holy and has often been described as God, often been described as spirit. But there's very much confusion about what that reality is that's intertwined with physical reality. And there often is a confusion about, is it like higher than physical reality? And many people often also confuse that meaning up. But the more you start to understand it, the more you start to realize that higher does not necessarily mean up. It means lighter, and it means smaller. And so lighter and smaller is like interpenetrating in the space we currently occupy. But because of its lightness and smallness, it often goes unnoticed to us. So in 2020, I was also in a space where I was like, I'm done with corporate work, and I'm done with these shitty, angry, frustrated people that are always like, I really struggled to accept that the reality of corporate work was dealing with weird and fucked up people. Because in two of the environments that I've been in, I met the same type of demonic, like angry, furious individuals who you wonder, like, if that's your life for 40 years, you really are degrading your physical organs by emitting such volatile energy all the time, and you're really making the lives of other people so challenging and like terrible. You're such a terrible person, and how are you a terrible person in this environment and it's seen as normal? So I did not want to accept that as my reality, because I already knew from, mom sharing stories with me about the challenges she's faced in her workplace. And I never really wanted that to be something that was normalized for me. I never really went throughout life believing that people being crazy and fucked up is something that I must tolerate, and I must welcome it and embrace it, and be there, and like, and also become a crazy fucked up person. I never really wanted to do that. So whenever I left an environment, it was always with this conscious knowing of, I don't want to be like you. I really don't want to be like you. I see you and I see that you're someone I really do not want to be like. I know that if I hang out here a bit longer, I'm going to become like you. And I know enough about the way the mind works to know that I must leave now, so that I can regain a sense of who I am. And I really don't want to be like you. I don't want to be like you. In 2020, I was following my passion, so I left that corporate work and I decided to go to art school. And it just so happened that there was this COVID pandemic during the time, and I went back to live with my mom in Greytown. So at the time, I was like doing art school online, but I was also smoking a lot of weed because I was in the space where I was struggling to feel the fulfillment of what the pursuit of passion promised me, because I had not come to grips yet with that it needed work. And that's the work I was doing in art school. So I was kind of like doing that. I was doing the work, but then, like zoning out and then doing the work, but, so like escaping my life because I was still challenged at the time. It was still a time where I was like coming to grips with what the new reality was looking like. There was this time where I know that I was completely like lucid and sober at the time, and I had this like moment where my all of I was sitting on the bed, and all of everywhere I could see was like this dazzling, glimmering, white, sparkly thing. Just looked white, sparkly, like a disco ball everywhere. And it was so intense that I had to close my eyes and lie down in the bed for like a couple of minutes. It was too much for my senses to handle what I was seeing. And that was the first time that I ever had an experience, that I ever had a validating experience that my inner work was showing me, was beginning to show me something that I'd only ever read previously as like testimony from others. I'd only ever heard about this, like this dazzling, blinding reality that is all light. And I never really, it always relies on faith and trust until you actually have the experience yourself. And I had that experience, and it was so deeply fulfilling for me, even though my nervous system could not handle it, that it was like, yes, the work is challenging, and the inner work more so is also challenging, but continue to do it and continue to do the inner observation with your meditation. So in 2020, I was after uh, I was doing the meditation. I got into this point like somewhere in August where I had an argument with my mom, and I recognized that the way that argument made me feel was like this per- this person didn't care about me. It felt like my mother didn't really have concern about my well-being or my life, and that was so heartbreaking, because leading up to that moment, my interactions with my mom were always like she was not present and available for me, and she might have been delivering on physical needs, but she really did not have the emotional capacity to ask me how I am, to even hear how I am. There was always this fixing attitude of, let me give you advice, let me give you advice, not this attitude of, I hear you, I see you, I hear you deeply, I feel what you. I never had that presence. And so that moment in that argument continued to validate for me that this woman was not who I wanted her to be or who I needed. She was more herself. She was herself. She was always who she was. And it was not about what I wanted. It was not about what I needed. She kind of had her own life. And for me, that like, it's that epiphany moment where you realize that your parents always had their own life. And though you were an important factor in their life for a long time, even amongst that context, they always had something else going on that did not involve you. And that was so painful for me to deal with that I went into this deep depression momentarily. But I remember at the end of that argument, being so overwhelmed that I just like meditated for 2 hours, because I needed to. The 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 volatility, the suffering internally of the breakdown of that belief system was so like shaking to me that I needed to like retreat internally, and I needed to like dissipate it in the meditation. So that was one moment that showed me. And it was one of those things that was like very much not even consciously thought about. I was just so overwhelmed with what my senses, my mind, and my body was experiencing that I was like, gotta go and gotta go internal. So it felt like the obvious thing to do at the time, and it was another moment of like reinforcing to me that meditation was really like giving me some fruits to work with. At the end of August, this like beginning of September, I really started to feel like, oh, I also forgot to mention that I was kicked out of that house by my uncle, who, like, I remember he was saying this thing to me, we don't see eye to eye. And it really continued a decades long theme of being like disliked by this person. So my mom does not own her home. She stays in the backyard of her brother, and that's essentially his house that he built for him, for her. At some point, both of us stayed in it. I stayed in it with my mom, and then I left that house when I went to university, and then I continued to come there periodically in holidays. And then I was kicked out of that house in 2020, and I remember feeling so rejected. Firstly, by this argument with my mom, where I was truly reminded of how I matter, but I don't matter fully because she has her own life. And I was reminded that I really don't matter to this person who's my uncle and never did. And I really felt like there was really nowhere for me to go. There was nowhere for me to go. So I remember sending an email to the warden of the Forest Hill residence at the time, and I remember feeling like I'm so distraught, and I'm in an unhealthy environment, and I need to know, is the residence open? Can I come there? And luckily, the residence was open and it was starting to take students again. So I left and I went back to the residence, and that was something that I needed. I needed that. I needed the peace of being on my own. So at the end of 2020, I was living in the residence, and I was doing meditation. Um, and I was starting to like foresee that meditation was becoming so important for me that it needed more and more of my conscious intention and attention. And at the time, I remember doing this art project for photography where it was about like your future self or something like that. And I remember depicting my future self as enlightened or like self realized, having the not just the understanding but the experience of knowing the truth of reality, which has often been called spirit or God. So I was starting to like set or embrace that my life could align the purpose of um, doing God's work, but align this very important thing with the meditation practice, which is proving to be so fulfilling for me, and align also the pursuit of creativity, which was art, and also help me navigate physical reality, because meditation was there as like the way to iron out the wrinkles of the volatile mental tendencies. And going into 2021, I applied to be a subwarden at the residence, and I was successful. So I was chosen for health and wellness portfolio. One of the important things that I want to do in that portfolio as a way of like doing a contribution to the students was to do a 1 hour weekly meditation on Mondays. And I can't remember how many weeks that went through, but I remember doing it, and I remember creating the advert and having sessions with individuals. And at the time, it was a bit challenging even for me to do an hour's worth of meditation, because I remember being a bit conflicted about what really was the practice, because there's so many meditation practices out there, and there's so many types of meditation that I struggle to understand the essence and the fundamentals of what really is the practice of meditation. So at the time, I couldn't understand, like, do I chant Om, or do I stay into the darkness, or do I contemplate infinity, or, do I like observe my breathing, or do I chant a different mantra, or do I visualize something? It's so challenging to visualize. Is it okay to visualize at that level, or do I visualize until it becomes as vivid as physical reality? I had all of these internal debates and like inner conflict about what exactly was the practice that I should follow and see it through. As 2021 kept going on, I was doing these. I was still in art school and I was in my second year and I was doing painting and photography, and all of my artworks were dealing with something relating to mental, spiritual, or physical, like experience. And I was starting to like hone in on that. The creation of art was something that I was very deeply, purposefully, and passionate about, but also starting to see how the integration of the spiritual themes could be impactful to the lives of others. And I was meditating, of course, I was meditating. In 2022, oh, 2021, my funding ran out, so I couldn't continue with art school. But I remember my final exhibition was very much where I wanted it to be. I remember being in art school and I was really like balancing a bunch of things. So I couldn't be a top class A student. It needed too much attention. I needed to also work the job as a subordinate, and I needed to also direct attention to my future plans, what I was going to do after art school, because I knew that the funding was running out. So, me splitting my attention between various things means that I had to have a standard that I wanted my exhibition to meet, and that was not like a standard, but it was good, and it was healthy, and it was sufficient, and it was decent, and it was well done. It was well done. So I left my exhibition in a well done standard. um Going into 2022, I had to move back home, but I couldn't move to my mom's place in Greytown because my I'd been kicked out of that, and I was no longer welcome there by my uncle, and I felt very uncomfortable in that home because I was the second person to be kicked off that property. Remember, the first person to be kicked off that property was my grandmother, and I spoke about this, I think, in episode 1 when I mentioned that my grandmother got into an argument with her mom, or my great grandmother at the time, and was kicked out of that house. So when I was kicked out of that house, for to me it appeared to be a cycle of like being so consumed in the ownership and control of the individuals that live on the property, that if they don't align with your ways of thinking, then they must go. And for me, that was a curse. So seeing that two examples is enough for a curse, or not a curse on an individual, a curse of that space. So I didn't want to go back there, and so I went to live at my aunt's place, and I stayed there for like 9 months. I stayed 9 months at my aunt's place, and I remember sleeping on the floor in the lounge. And you know what? I was going through the most challenging time in my life because, on the one hand, I was wondering whether it's my destiny to be a bum. I was really like contemplating if it's my destiny to be nothing. And I was trying these different business ideas. I remember trying like drop shipping, and I remember learning how to create websites, learning how to do social media content design and social media advertising. I remember learning how to do the like integration of the store with the drop shipping supplier, and doing the product descriptions and all of these types of things I was learning. And I tried drop shipping, and I tried freelancing on creating landing pages, and I tried copywriting, and I tried like each time over 8 months, I was really iterating. I was trying and testing, trying and testing. And the thing that was starting to come to mind was that, I know how to do social media advertising. Why don't I advertise something about meditation and spirituality? And at the same time, I was working with someone. I was having conversations with Shaun Abrams, and I was having conversations with Shaun Abrams, and Shaun Abrams was talking to me about coaching, and I started to feel like, well, okay, wait, I'm not really like, as a coach, you are helping people, but more so you are allowing them to discover the answers. and you are really guiding their thinking, and you're providing support and you're providing accountability. And I like that. And I also like spirituality. And maybe I can do something like the intersection of spirituality and coaching. And I like created an ad for spiritual life coach. So I put that on Facebook and I started to get leads. I also wrote this ebook. I wrote an ebook called like Conscious Pain Relief, where I spoke about the technique of surrender that Dr. David Hawkins speaks about. And it's a technique that I practiced. I practiced surrender in 2021. I don't know, not many people know this, but I was dealing with like internal bleeding in my lower abdominal region. And so I remember intuitively it felt like this energy in my body was like reverberating too strongly and it was tearing apart my insides. But physically it was like, the lining of your lower intestines is disintegrating and it's causing, bleeding. So the technique of surrender was very helpful because um, it was something that I was using at the time to deal with that, because when I was going to the hospital they were telling me we don't know, we can't see anything, we don't know what's going on. So I wrote that book, Conscious Pain Relief, to share how it works with other people who may not necessarily have been familiar with it. And I also wrote another ebook called Peace and How to Have It, and I spoke about peacefulness and mental clarity. So I offered the ebooks as a lead generating magnet on Facebook, and I got many, many leads, and I started to get some paying clients who were willing to pay 250 Rand for a session of spiritual life coaching with me. And as I continued to do that, I started to see that um, having conversations with me was very much a profound experience for many people. And so they were willing to pay for a spiritual life coach. And I also was at the time a bit unclear about what exactly spiritual life coaching. So I needed to refine it more strongly, but at the same time, my business was starting to generate more income. And then I started to I was ready to move out of the house, and I remember having a discussion with my aunt somewhere in August or July about, what's happening with my life, and what's happening, yeah, where's this all leading to, the I remember having this conversation with my grandmother where she was like, what's happening, they wanted an update of like what's happening, when. I think the real question was, when will I be moving out and what my plan is. The question was not when will I be moving out, the question is, do I have a plan, am I creating a plan. In that, when I had the discussion with my aunt in like July or August, I didn't really have a plan about when to move out, but I agreed that it was going to be. I think having had my grandmother talk to me in a like a very like peaceful, like loving way, and having had a like very mature conversation with my aunt, I could see that the moment was, it was imminent, it was coming, it needed to be soon. So after that conversation, I recognized that my income was sufficient for not the best place to live in Cape Town, but for like a decent, acceptable place. And so I was looking at those decent, acceptable places, and one of the places I found was Delft, which is known to be a not so great environment. But knowing that I lived in Greytown, I was like, I'm made for this. I can go live in Delft if I need to pay 1,000 Rand for rent and live in a strange neighborhood, then I need to do that. I'm closer to Cape Town, and that's something I'm grateful for. To take a taxi to town would be 20 Rand. I love Claremont. To take a taxi to Claremont would be 20 Rand. It's a deal. I'll be close to the airport also, so I made that decision. By the time September came around, I was already having the discussion of like, I'm going to be leaving soon. So when I moved to Claremont and I was living in Delft, I remember facing some challenges with the neighbors. Like their kids did not understand boundaries, and I would lived in the backyard, and they would come like stand at the door, and they would peer in through the glass door and like look at what I was doing, and they did not respect privacy, and they did not have an idea of privacy. They did not have an idea of like what it meant to this is a stranger who's moved into your home, and you are like so much near them, and it's so weird for me. I just, it was causing great turmoil for me, and there were some other things that were causing turmoil for me. And I remember, like, the saving grace of that environment was that I was not close to a busy road, and I was not like in the vicinity of a lot of noise. So my bedroom was relatively quiet and a peaceful space to be in, and I could meditate deeply. And that was a saving grace for me. And let me pause there for a second and remind you that if you want to learn the meditation practice that I have created after meditating for the past 5 years, after asking myself what really is the practice of meditation and simmering it down into some basic and fundamental concepts, which I then put into 12 video lessons. And you can click down below and get my 5 minute stress relieving meditation course. And this course is so profound because it's the meditation that I use on a daily basis to regularly clear and cleanse my mind of mental and emotional volatility so that I can wake up each day with a sense of being peaceful, refreshed, and renewed, ready to tackle the challenges and the obstacles that lay ahead. And I want to be able to share this practice with you because I want to empower you to be able to take life, grab life, and to be able to navigate it in a way where you can start to really see progress made on some of the things that you really value. And for a limited time only, I'm offering a free 45-minute coaching session in which I'm going to help you get clear on one of the mental obstacles that you're facing in your life currently. And I'm going to help you develop a plan to overcome that obstacle and to gather the courage to take action on that plan. And believe me, if you don't know what meditation is, this is the course for you because this course requires no prior experience. It's relatively affordable. It's only $299 at the moment. Might be the price might change in the future, but there's really a lot going on there. My whole 5 years of experience is in that course. There's 12 video lessons, there's hand-drawn explanations and illustrations, there's a bunch of bonuses. All three ebooks that I've written are in there as a bonus. I've even put there like a digital meditation planner where you can track your pre-meditation intentions, your post-meditation reflections. You can track your daily time like I do on a daily basis. And believe me, when I started to track my meditation times, then my meditation practice turbocharged into a different dimension, into another level, which I'm so glad and grateful for. Um, and I also have this one page meditation cheat sheet, which has all the basics and the fundamentals. So you can really put that meditation cheat sheet in a place that you can refer to often, and you can get, a regular glimpse at the fundamentals. So don't hesitate to take your life into your own hands, and don't hesitate to prioritize your peace and your mental clarity. Click down below, get my meditation course, and for limited time only, there's a free 45-minute coaching session there for you to really help you gain some clarity on some things that you may be in the dark about. And sometimes, many times, it often helps to have a sounding board there to be able to remind you of some things that you may have missed. Yeah, so take action on that and get that meditation course now. Okay, where I left off previously was about um, that my apartment in Delft had like a peaceful, quiet, relatively quiet space to meditate in. And I remember receiving this. I bought a fridge, and I remember having the fridge had like these polystyrene sheets inside. And I remember placing the polystyrene sheets there, and I bought this gray blanket from Pep, and I folded the blanket. So I had a meditation space in my bedroom. It was my meditation practice was starting to become daily at this point, and it was starting to become a need. Like it was starting to become a need, and it was starting to become a lifestyle. And when I continued to do meditation in that space, and I continued to practice my business, get clients, and grow my income, I also started to see that the this benefit of meditation where an emotionally or mentally challenging thing would occur, and because of meditation the duration of the stay of that volatility would be shortened. So whereas in the past I would be sitting with some type of volatility for months, maybe even years, now that I've meditated, the benefit of doing meditation is that something challenging happens, and it stays for maybe a couple of hours or a couple of days. And that for me is profound and significant, because it means that I can, like, if you ever imagine this example of your clothes getting wrinkled, and if you take the example of clothes getting wrinkled as your mind being negatively affected by something mentally and emotionally, then you know that the iron irons out those wrinkles. Similarly, meditation smooths out the volatility in your mind that could be mental and emotional, so that you can wake up refreshed and renewed the next day, a better sense of being like whole and complete, and not really holding on to the baggage of yesterday. So I started to see that more and more, and I started to gain a profound mental clarity at times that was also deeply fulfilling for me. I was also smoking a lot of weed at the time. I was also smoking cigarettes because I was really like, it was a way for me to escape that I was living in a life of poverty out of my choice, because that's what my budget could handle at the moment. And there were times living in Delft where you smell shit in the air because the sewage is blocked somewhere, and the fecal matter is radiating in the air, and you just smell it. You're inhaling it all this time. My apartment had mold. I was breathing in mold spores. I remember there was like not a night that I didn't have night sweats because my immune system was overactive. I was just like, so I was really going through a lot of things, but at the same time, I always had a vision of what my future held for me, and it was not that, and that brought me comfort. So sometime in July, like I remember having the psychedelic trip where I was just like, in the psychedelic trip, one of the lessons that was brought to me of like, I know the Buddha didn't speak English, but there's an English translation of like, if you in the shit, then it starts to appear normal for you. And literally, I was in the shit. Why? I was living in the environment where, like, I could smell the shit in the air, and it was entering my body, and it was unhealthy, and it was like, it was disgusting. Really, did I think that I was worth that? I For me to have chosen that life out of the budget was necessary, but to believe that I deserved that was not something that I wanted. And I was starting to become aware of that. That I stayed there for so long was me almost entering the territory of like, what if this becomes normal for me? And I never wanted that. So that was a profound moment for me. After that psychedelic trip, I quit smoking cigarettes, I quit smoking weed. I was like, another insight that came to me in that psychedelic trip was like, smoked beef, the samba chips, that's what you're doing to your lungs every time you smoke, because that smoke is such of high heat that it's cooking your organs internally. And it's like, people use smoke to cook flesh, for they use smoke to cook steaks and ribs, and you're smoking thinking you're enjoying your pleasure. Meanwhile, you're cooking your living organs from the inside. It showed me that I quit smoking, and left it. So within a month, I was successful with the job in like data analytics or analysis, and I moved to I moved to this place in Sunningdale, and I was staying with this demon woman. I started to know, at first glance, this woman appeared to be. I was staying in a room in a house which I was paying like 5,000 rand for. And at first glance, I walked into that house, and like, she spoke about having a business, and I saw like Buddhist like symbology around, and I felt, I saw dogs, and I felt, this could be a right place for me. So I chose to stay there. And then I started to see that she was very controlling and demanding, and I started to see that within the first 2 or 3 days. So it was a heavily volatile situation. I remember, us arguing over text, and I really felt so transgressed upon by this individual, that she had the idea that she could tell me how to live, even though I'd lived successfully with so many groups of people, clean spaces, harmonious spaces. But this woman had a sense of feeling like she needed to control someone. And there was this other old white man living there who really did not have a voice. It looked like he was so beaten and broken by life that he was like on a leash, with her, and he was okay with that. I'm sorry, I'm nobody's bitch, and I really did not want to be on anybody's leash, so I was out of there within a month. And it got to this point where the like on the last day I was packing, and she was like banging on my door like, when are you going to leave? And I remember swearing at her because I was so like at my wits end with this person that I could not understand how on the last day as I'm about to leave, you were like urgent for my leaving, and I paid to stay for that last day. I really was minding my business throughout that time. I was in my room. I was really like, I was really not creating drama for this person, but she was just a psycho bitch. And I learned my lesson about staying with controlling people. I think one thing that has come to mind over this past time is that I really like got myself into some situations with some weird fucked up people, from that demon woman in that first job to that psycho aggressor in that second job to that like another demon woman that I stayed with in Sunningdale. And then there was this, I haven't told you about this other demon woman that I worked with recently. And then there was this other psycho who was also there, who was like controlling the show. So it was just so much of like, sometimes when I've stepped into certain spaces, I've been confronted with like the disease of humanity. I've been confronted with the disease of the humanity, and I've really been confronted with how you can make, how if people don't get the right care, they can turn into abominations. And in some corporate environments, there are such abominations walking around, and they've been abominations walking around for such a long time that you look at that demon and you might think it's normal. And some people do that. Some people look at the demons and they think they're normal because they're paying their salary, and then they turn out, you ask yourself, what the fuck is going on? What am I doing here? And I'm glad to have had the clarity to realize that I don't want that for my life. I never want to look at a fucked up person and think, if I stay longer, I'm going to become like you, and I'm okay with that. No thanks. So bring it back around. Meditation helped me to become clear on what my thoughts were saying, because my thoughts were often doing a description of reality and were like describing my internal feelings as well. So I kind of like was gaining a deeper sense of separation between the mind and between my awareness. And I started to see that what I am is not a body, I'm inhabiting a body. And we've known this from the spiritual teachings, that we are not bodies, we inhabit bodies. We also know that, well, from the inner observation, I'm not a mind, I have a mind. My mind thinks autonomously, it does autonomous descriptions, it even speaks in thoughts, and we call that inner monologue. I have access to that for my interaction in physical reality as well. It's my mind that creates my image of my hand, it creates my image of my body, of my senses, of my surroundings, and so forth. I started to also see that um, meditation was opening me up to deeper reality, which is often be described as spiritual. And spiritual can be so ambiguous. There are a lot of interpretations about what spiritual is, and about, is spiritual religious, is it science or not science? And I think that when you practice inner observation or meditation long enough, you start to see that in the past they may not have had the sufficient language to describe what was being experienced, so they called it spirit. And spirit really means essence. Essence, essence meaning like what it really is. What it really is. The essence of reality is not physical. I think we know that also, but you cannot experience the essence of reality if you're not stilling your senses. So, over this past week, bring it back and back around over this past week to the subtle energy centers and the chakras. I always only had testimony from the readings and the teachings of individuals that told me where in the body it was, their colors, shapes, petals, sounds, this and that. Over this week, but over like the past 6 months, I've started to feel them inside. And I've started to feel what a, a blockage feels like. And a blockage, it has physical correspondence. It often feels like a tension in the flesh. They call it a knot. It feels like a tightness or tension or knot. And so if you can, because there's a correspondence between mind, body, and spirit, if you can relieve the tension in one area, you can relieve the tension in the other area. So if you want to alleviate the blockage in the chakra, then you can alleviate the blockage in the flesh, and by correspondence it alleviates the blockage in the chakra. So the deeper meditations were giving me, like, my meditations. Remember, I also mentioned this, that I was starting to track my meditations. I was starting to track the times on the meditation tracker, which I have there. And I'm starting to see, like, on whether I do daily meditation, did I miss a day, how many minutes did I do morning only or evening only or morning and evening. And now, over the past, let's say, 8 months, doing an hour is not just, it's not challenging anymore, and it even appears to be standard and normal, and like an average amount of time. So getting the perception of the deeper spiritual realities, what I'm telling you right now is that there comes a point where you don't have to rely on faith. Your experience validates for you what have been written about. You don't need faith at some point, you need experience, and the experience only comes when you, like, do the inner observation. When you close your eyes, some people think when they close their eyes, they forget to realize that they're looking internally, and that's where God is. They think they're closing their eyes and looking there, but instead they're closing their eyes and looking there, because God is in that dark, silent space inside. And that's something that has been missed over, many centuries of misinterpretation. You get to a point where you realize that that's what it is, and that's where you're really looking. So as I continue to, like, still and silence my body in meditation, some of the subtle things become more evident. Like, I can feel the vortex. I can feel the yellow vortex, like, where next to where my stomach is in the middle here, and I can feel the green vortex here around my heart, and I can feel the blockage, which is, the blockage around my heart, around the chakra, has been so intense that it is like it is like grabbing on it, like causing a tension, like a tightness here, but also like pulling on the shoulder back muscles. I can even feel it in my arm. And that's a representation of how much, like, traumatizing experiences I've been in throughout my life. We have so much rejection and, like, meeting insensitive, harsh, brutal people that you really don't want to be like. Seeing that so much just made my, like, my heart, like, tighten up and want to protect itself. But now I'm, like, relieving that. I'm having to, like, open up, relieve it. Like, as you continue to feel deeper and deeper, you can like, relieve tension more and more subtly. And that's something I've been doing over this past week. Like, I remember yesterday, I didn't even need to close my eyes. I could feel it, and I could, like, breathe into it. There's a way that, like, I can concentrate now, even though I might be awake. There's a way I can also internally concentrate to make sure that I'm like relieving that tension that's there. Like, it takes 7 hours. It did take 7 hours of work, but I needed to do it. Like, am I going to do 7 hours on one day or 1 hour over 7 days? I'd rather do 7 hours on one day, especially because I have the time and the attention. I'm giving it the attention it deserves. So I'm so grateful that I'm in this space where I can now validate to keep going, because when you read books and you read texts and you read ideologies and so forth, it comes to a space where you wonder, like, all of this is relying on my belief, and all of this is relying on my belief and my intellectualizing. Why is it that only certain individuals in time have been able to experience these higher realities? And it's not that only certain individuals in time have been able to experience these realities, is that those individuals who have spoken out about the inner reality have been often, like, murdered, because they have been interpreted to, like, be doing blasphemy. Um, like, some of the Abrahamic religions, they have their sects, which are very much like God is internal, And then there are some which have their sects which are like, this is the chosen one and you must worship this one, and you can't worship, you can't like have an inner reality, and you only see God after you die. And they really have strong ideologies that separate God from us. And then there are these other teachings which say, like, God is the essence of your being, and God is the source of life, and you are the source of life, and God is essentially your highest self. And you see God not as a being, but as a state of consciousness. And you are entitled to access that state of consciousness within your lifetime. And you don't have to be special, and you don't have to be worthy, and you don't have to be deserving. You just have to want it enough. You just have to see it, that it's there for you. Whenever you choose to reach for it, it's there. So now that I'm starting to see that, meditation is allowing me to validate for myself the experience of some of these things, it continues to prove so beneficial and wonderful that I embarked on this journey in the first place. Because, you know, in the beginning, when you're looking for results, it can be slow to see results, and sometimes the results can be so subtle that we might miss them. But as we continue to do meditation for a long time, like I have, and I love it, you think it doesn't really feel like 5 years anymore. And it tells me, I'm really looking forward to 20 years. If I even get 20 years, if I get 40 years, it's going to be like profound, profound, profound. My whole life concept will have changed by then. And I'm so glad and grateful for it. I'm looking forward to it. So I want to encourage you from, the story that I've shared today to embark on the practice of meditation, because based on what I've shared with you, the deeper spiritual realities, they don't need your faith, they don't need your trust, and they don't need your belief. They only need your faith, trust, and belief, because you can't really confirm your experience of them in your waking reality. But as you start to quiet some of your mind and quiet your body in the practice of meditation, it starts to become evident to you some of these things that people were talking about throughout time, that you might call the great spiritual masters. But at some point, you start to recognize that they're not really the great spiritual masters. They're essentially showing us the next step in human evolution, which is not an evolution of the physical form, it's an evolution of the awareness, of the infinite awareness that is the true nature of what we are. And it shows us that our average state is essentially a dumbed down version of what we could be and what we really are. And if we choose to seek our higher self, not only will we find it, but we will find our higher self. And our higher self in some religions is called Christ. Our higher self in some religions is called Krishna, and it's called Buddha, and our highest self is what has been called God. And essentially all of us are that one thing. That's also something that, many people often initially struggle to come to grips with, that how can you manifest an individual personality yet all be the same entity? It reconciles. Paradoxes are allowed in reality. It makes sense. It does not need to make sense. It makes sense in that it does not need to make sense, is what I'm saying. And you start to accept that the gray areas of reality, they're okay. You can have it both ways. It can be individual and collective at the same time. It can be one and many at the same time. It can be you and infinity at the same time. It can be me and, my infinite self at the same time. And those things become acceptable at some point. So I really want to encourage you to embrace meditation. And from some of the benefits that I've shared with you throughout this episode, I hope that you take it seriously. And if you want to get started, and if you want to do the same practice that I do on a daily basis, then click below and get my 5 minute stress relieving meditation course. It'll teach you the very same practice that I do on a daily basis. And that's a practice that I distilled and created um, as the fundamentals of my search and seeking over the past 5 years. Remember, at some point I was confused about what meditation was. There's so many ways of going about it, but I've really taken the basics of it, and I've put it into this course, into 12 easy lessons that explain a lot of things for you that are very suitable for beginners and people with no prior experience. And when you purchase that meditation course for limited time only, I'll give you a free 45-minute coaching session so that you can get clear on an obstacle that you're facing a challenge with. You can gain clarity and and create an action plan, and you can gather the courage to take action on it and start to gather momentum so that you can make progress on that goal that means so much to you. So I really urge you, grab life. And when you practice meditation, that's what you're doing. You're seeing your mind as a tool that you have access to, and you recognize that if your mind is a if your mind is a body of water, when the body of water is still and clean, then the light can shine through it. But if the body of water is dirty, muddy, shaking, volatile, the light is not shining through it. So still your mind, clean your mind with meditation. Meditation is like the window cleaner. If your mind was a window, meditation is the window cleaner. So get my meditation course and start to take the practice seriously. It's relatively affordable, and it's something that you'll have access to forever and ever. When you download this video, save it into any of your online drives and just keep them to watch them whenever you want. And it's really an investment into your own mental well-being and your own clarity, and knowing that your mind is the director of your life. It means that you want to take your life seriously, you want to take yourself seriously, and you want to grab life and start to direct it in a way that you think is worthy and deserving of your time, attention, and effort. Click below and get that course. Okay, in closing, I want to thank you again for joining me on episode 4, and I start to gather more clarity on what exactly Deep Topics with Shaun is, and what really are we doing here. We I don't want to shy away from anything that I've learned. And if there's something that I've realized in this time, is that this content that I'm putting out onto the internet is really content that I'm sharing with humanity, but also I owe it to my fellow humans to share my understandings of things. And you have the right to not resonate, you have the right to disagree, but there are many people that will resonate and there are many people that will agree, and that's who I'm making this content for. I'm not making the content to convince people. I'm not making the content to convert, to evangelize, to proselytize. And I'm not doing those things. I really, if you're not where I am, then it's fine. If you are where I am, come stay and listen more. I'll give you episode 5 next week. And I think this was the great culmination of starting to see where things are going. That the practice of meditation has been so profound in my life that it has allowed me to start to recognize that there are things that I was not taught in my upbringing about the nature of human existence and physical reality. And one of those things is that a clear, calm, and peaceful mind is a superpower. They don't teach you that. They teach you that a clear, calm, and peaceful mind is for a very select few, that they then frame those select few as like nuns, yogis, gurus, those types of things. They make you believe that it's not for the average person, it's not for you. You have to go out of your way to become someone like that. What I'm showing you is that in your daily life, in your daily existence, you can do this. You can prioritize your peace, calm, and clarity in your daily existence. And you don't really need to go to an ashram somewhere. You don't really need to go to a retreat somewhere. You don't really need to take 50 days in a mountain or 40 nights in meditating in a cave or in a desert, like some individuals have done. There might be a time and place for that, but for the average person, it's not right now. So we can do it while we're living our basic human existence, and we can thrive in this volatile world. We can thrive in this fast-paced world. And I hope that I can give you the courage to also recognize that, do not look at some of the fucked up things that people are doing and think that that is normal. Call it out. Call it out, and also recognize whether that's something that you want to become normal for you. Don't make abusive things normal for you, and don't make weird things normal for you. If you stay in the shit, you'll become the shit, and you'll think that the shit is normal. So don't put yourself in that type of situation. Believe that you deserve better and seek your better until you find it. That's where I want to leave it. I want to thank you so much for joining us, wherever you're listening. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're listening to this on Spotify, I'm so glad and grateful that you joined. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and let me know down below, either in a review or a comment, what did you think about this episode? Did you resonate with anything? Maybe you didn't resonate with anything. Let's start a discussion down below. Leave a like if you can, leave some stars if you can. And I want to wish you a wonderful week ahead. I want to wish you a wonderful weekend. Thank you for joining. Take care and get my meditation course. And I'll see you next week. Goodbye, everyone.